Subscribe to my YouTube channel because what you're about to see will leave you stunned. It was just another scorching afternoon on the dusty roadside of Zhangcheng City. Horns blared in the background. Street vendors shouted over each other, and the heat shimmered off the asphalt like boiling oil. But among the chaos, one man stood quietly behind a small street food cart, his face calm, his hands steady, as he grilled skewers of meat with an almost artistic grace. His name, Dou God. Everyone on that street called him Poor Guy Dou. With his wrinkled apron, sunburned arms, and a patched-up food cart barely holding together, no one spared him more than a passing glance. He looked like a nobody, just another struggling vendor trying to earn a few yuan to survive. "Hey, hurry up, you're so slow," a rich young man in designer clothes shouted from his shiny convertible. "No wonder you're stuck here roasting meat. You'll never be more than a street rat." His friends laughed cruelly. Dou God didn't flinch. He flipped the skewer gently and handed over the food. "Enjoy," he said with a polite smile. Pathetic. The young man snatched the food, threw a crumpled note on the counter, and sped off, leaving behind a cloud of smoke and laughter. But behind those calm eyes of Dou God was a storm. What no one knew was that this poor street vendor, this humble, quiet man, was once the most feared warrior in the Eastern Hemisphere. A ghost on the battlefield, the undefeated legend, the almighty god of war, known only in classified military circles as the Dou God. His real name had been erased from official records, his enemies buried or broken. He had led elite operations, stopped wars before they started, and vanished entire mercenary groups in a single night. Yet now, here he was, selling skewers on a broken cart, surrounded by people who mocked him like he was worth less than dirt. Why would the most powerful man alive, someone who could crush armies, be hiding behind a grill on a roadside? That's where the mystery begins. Earlier that morning, a girl named Lin Xiaoyu had walked past his stall, clutching a worn-out book and coughing softly. Her thin frame and tired eyes caught Dou God's attention. She looked barely 16 and clearly hadn't eaten in days. He didn't say anything, but silently packed a portion of food and handed it to her. I don't have money," she whispered, backing away. "It's all right," he replied gently. "Come back when you do." She blinked at him, surprised. No one had ever shown her kindness before. That small act would set off a chain of events Dou God couldn't ignore, because what he didn't know was Xiaoyu was the granddaughter of the man who once saved his life in the most brutal mission of his past, a man who had gone missing and whose enemies were now hunting her down, thinking she knew something she shouldn't. And today, those enemies had arrived in Zhangcheng, 2 black SUVs with tinted windows, parked just across from the food stall. Men in suits stepped out, sharp-eyed, cold, and deadly. They didn't glance at the other vendors. Their eyes locked straight on Xiaoyu, who had returned to thank Dou God for the food. She froze. Her hands trembled. One of the men tapped his earpiece and whispered something. Dou God immediately noticed the change in air. His senses, long dulled by silence and smoke, sharpened like a blade. The calm vendor disappeared in that instant. He stepped in front of Xiaoyu, casually. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The men didn't reply. One of them smirked. "This is none of your business. Old man, old man." That was the first mistake. Xiaoyu tried to hide behind him, her voice shaking. They've been following me. I think they want something from my grandfather." "Don't worry," Dou God said, eyes never leaving the men. "They won't touch you." Another suit stepped forward, clearly the leader. "We have no quarrel with you, sir. Walk away, or you'll regret it. That was the second mistake. The rich kids from earlier, still hanging out nearby, noticed the tension and started filming on their phones. Yo, the skewer guy's about to get a beating. Let's see what this poor fool does now. People gathered, watching, whispering. Some laughed. Some expected Dou God to get slapped around and humiliated again. But they didn't know who he really was. They didn't see how his left hand had already slipped under the cart, gripping a hidden sheath. They didn't notice the faint scars along his knuckles, or how his stance had subtly shifted into combat position. Only Xiao Yu saw it, and her eyes widened. Dou Fan's voice dropped, quiet as steel in snow. Last chance. Walk away. The leader scoffed. Take him! 3 men lunged forward. What happened next? No one could explain. In less than 3 seconds, the attackers were face down on the pavement. One man's wrist was twisted in an impossible angle. Another was unconscious. The third was clutching his knee, screaming. No one saw how it happened. No one could see it. The phones that were recording, all static. The footage, gone, as if time itself had skipped. Gasps echoed through the crowd. The rich boys stared in disbelief. Well, what the hell just happened? Dou Fan didn't say a word. He turned back to Xiao Yu and placed a calm hand on her shoulder. Let's get you home. But as he walked away, the remaining men in suits stood frozen in shock. One of them whispered into his mic, "It's him. It's really him. The Dou God is alive." And just like that, the game had changed. What would the world do now that the hidden almighty god of war had returned? And he was angry. The next few days after the incident on the street felt like a blur. Dou Fan went back to his humble life. Just as he had always done, he resumed working behind his food cart, flipping skewers, and smiling at the customers who had no idea of the man they were dealing with. To them, he was just Dou, the quiet, tired street vendor. But his mind was a different story. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was beginning to unravel. The men who had tried to attack him were just the tip of the iceberg. His instincts told him that they weren't just random thugs. They had been sent by someone powerful, the kind of person who knew exactly who he was and where to find him, and that person wasn't done with him. It wasn't long before Xiao Yu approached him again. This time, her eyes were filled with fear, and her hands trembled as she clutched a crumpled piece of paper. She looked over her shoulder, ensuring no one was following her, before walking up to Dou Fan's cart. "Mr. Dou," she whispered, "they're after me. They won't stop until they get what they want." Dou Fan's heart sank as he took a step closer. He could tell she was in danger. He had seen this before, in a different lifetime, a different war. "Who?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a murmur. Xiao Yu hesitated, as if deciding whether to trust him fully. Then, with a shaky breath, she spoke. "The Lei family. They're after my grandfather's research. It's something they'll kill for." Dou Fan's gaze hardened. The Lei family. He knew them all too well. Powerful, ruthless, and willing to stop at nothing to protect their interests. But why was Xiao Yu's grandfather involved? Xiao Yu must have sensed his confusion, because she quickly explained. "My grandfather, he was a scientist. He worked on some very important research for the government. But after he disappeared, the Lei family took everything. I've been looking for him, trying to find out what happened. But now they know I'm getting close." Dou Fan clenched his fists. It was clear now. This wasn't just some simple case of corporate greed. This was a matter of national security, and the Lei family had their claws deep in it. But Xiao Yu was right about one thing. Dou Fan couldn't ignore her. He owed her in some way. He owed her grandfather, too. Stay close to me, Dou instructed. Don't talk to anyone you don't trust. We'll figure this out. But deep inside, Dou knew this wasn't just about protecting Xiaoyu anymore. It was about facing the demons of his past, the enemies who had been searching for him for years. And they were getting closer. That night, Dou couldn't sleep. His mind raced, replaying every single mission he had been part of, every battle he had fought, every enemy he had left behind. It all came crashing back. The blood, the violence, the betrayal, the war he had tried to forget. As dawn broke, Dou made a decision. He couldn't hide forever. The Lei family wasn't just going to let him be, and if they thought they could threaten Xiaoyu to get what they wanted, they were gravely mistaken. Dou was about to show them just how dangerous it was to mess with someone like him. The next morning, Dou stood at the edge of Jiangcheng, looking out over the bustling city, the streets, the people, the noise. It all seemed so normal, so peaceful. But under the surface, there was a storm brewing. He could feel it. The Lei family's influence stretched across the city, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. But Dou wasn't going to be anyone's pawn, not anymore. The first move was to confront the Lei family head-on. He knew exactly where they operated, their headquarters in the heart of the city, a towering structure of glass and steel, where the most powerful figures in Jiangcheng made their decisions. Dou didn't go alone. Xiaoyu, despite her fear, insisted on coming with him. She had a right to know the truth about her grandfather. She had a right to face the people who had ruined their lives. As they approached the Lei family headquarters, the air grew thick with tension. The sleek black SUVs were parked in front, the same vehicles that had been at the street earlier. Dou heart beat faster. He was getting close. Wait here, Dou said, turning to Xiaoyu. Stay out of sight, she nodded, but her eyes were filled with determination. I'm not going anywhere, not without the truth. Dou gave her a small, reassuring smile, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't let anyone else get hurt because of him. He had to end this once and for all. He stepped inside the building, his presence almost instantly recognized. The Lei family's men moved in a silent formation, watching him with calculating eyes. The familiar faces from his past, mercenaries, bodyguards, and spies, stood in the hallways, ready to react at a moment's notice. But Dou didn't care. He walked forward like a man with nothing left to lose. At the end of the long hallway, in a grand office surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows, Lei Chaohao sat behind a massive desk, his fingers steepled in front of him. He didn't look surprised to see Dou Fan. Ah, the legendary Dou God, Lei Chaohao said with a cold smile. You're hard to miss, even in this city. I'm not here to play games, Chaohao, Dou said, his voice low and dangerous. You're going to release Xiaoyu's grandfather's research. Now, Chaohao raised an eyebrow, his smile widening. You really think I'd just hand over something like that? You don't understand the power you're up against, Dou. You can't hide forever. Dou eyes narrowed. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he also knew he couldn't back down. The battle for Xiaoyu's grandfather's legacy had just begun, and it was about to get much bloodier. Suddenly the sound of a door opening echoed through the office. Dou turned to see Xiaoyu step in, her face pale but resolute. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Lei Chaohao, she said, her voice steady. I'm taking back what's mine. And just like that, the game had changed. The tension in the room was palpable. Dou eyes locked on Xiaoyu as she walked in, her determination shining through her fear. Lei Chaohao's smirk faltered. Just for a moment, before he regained his composure. He clearly hadn't expected this. He'd thought he had all the cards. But now, with Xiao Yu standing firm by Dou Fan's side, the game had changed. You think you can just barge in here and take whatever you want? Lei Chao Hao scoffed. You're nothing but a street vendor. Dou, what do you really have to threaten me with? Dou Fan stepped forward, his presence now towering over the man who had once been his enemy in another life. He wasn't just the street vendor they thought he was. He wasn't just some man selling skewers on the corner. He was the almighty god of war, the fighter who had survived and conquered battles far beyond this city's reach. The only thing standing between you and your empire is me, Dou Fan said, his voice cold and unyielding. He wasn't afraid anymore. The Lei family had underestimated him for too long. The years of hiding, of playing the role of an ordinary man, were over. Lei Chao Hao took a step back, but his arrogance didn't vanish completely. You'll regret this, Dou. You don't know what you're dealing with. The Lei family is bigger than you can imagine. No one can take us down. Maybe no one can, Dou Fan replied. But I'm not here to take down the entire Lei family. I'm here for something much more personal. With that, Dou Fan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small old document. He held it up in front of Lei Chao Hao's face. It was the research Xiao Yu's grandfather had worked on. The very thing the Lei family had stolen all those years. Aiego. The papers were yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible. You're not the only one with power, Chao Hao. This research isn't just valuable to you. It's been hidden for a reason. And now it's time to return it. Lei Chao Hao's eyes widened. Where did you get that? He demanded, his voice rising. That's not supposed to exist. It's impossible. Xiao Yu stepped forward. Her eyes locked on the man who had caused so much pain. My grandfather knew the truth, and he left this for me. It's time you face what you've been hiding. Dou Fan smiled, a hint of satisfaction in his expression. He knew the stakes were high, but the game was finally reaching its peak. Lei Chao Hao had nowhere to run. His family's legacy was built on lies, and Dou Fan had just shattered those lies in front of him. As Dou Fan handed the document to Xiao Yu, she took a deep breath, her fingers trembling, but her resolve stronger than ever. This was the moment she had been waiting for, an end to the terror the Lei family had inflicted on her and her family for years. You're finished, Chao Hao, Dou Fan said, his voice full of finality. You might have thought you could control everything, but the truth always comes out. It's over. Lei Chao Hao glared at Dou Fan, fury flashing in his eyes. He knew he had lost. His empire, his plans, everything was crumbling in front of him. But even in his defeat, he tried one last desperate measure. You think I'll let this go so easily? You're nothing without me. You'll be nothing again. But Dou Fan wasn't done yet. He stepped closer, his voice now low and powerful. You've already lost. The world is changing, Chao Hao. People like you can't hold on to power forever. With those words, the door burst open, and a group of Xiao Yu's allies, government officials, journalists, and even some former enemies rushed into the room. They had been tracking the Lei family for months, gathering evidence of their corruption. With the research now in their hands, they had enough to bring the Lei family down once and for all. Lei Chao Hao's face drained of color as he realized his empire was collapsing around him. He made a last-ditch effort to flee, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and the authorities were closing in. The Lei family's reign of terror was over. Xiao Yu looked at Dou Fan, her eyes filled with gratitude. You did it. You really did it. Dou Fan nodded, his expression softening for the first time in days. We did it. You deserve to know the truth. As the authorities escorted Lei Chao Hao and his men out, Dou Fan and Xiao Yu stood together in the middle of the now empty office. The weight of the moment settled on them. But there was no more fear, no more uncertainty. For the first time in years, Dou Fan felt like he could finally breathe again. "I don't know how to thank you," Xiao Yu said softly. Dou Fan smiled, a hint of humor in his eyes. "You don't need to. You've already done more than enough by not giving up." And as the two of them walked out of the building, the bright sun shining down on them, Dou Fan couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. His days of hiding were over. The almighty God of War was back, and he was ready for whatever came next. For Xiao Yu, the search for her grandfather's truth had finally ended. But for Dou Fan, this was the first step toward a new path. A path where he would no longer hide. In the shadows, he would fight for what was right, no matter what. And as the city bustled around them, neither of them could deny that this was a victory worth celebrating. But in the back of their minds, they both knew there were still battles to fight and enemies to face. The game was far from over. And so, the story of the hidden almighty God of War, Dou Fan, continued.